Welcome to your first day of class, and most likely your very first website creation. This video is designed to go over the first assignment and the first set of directions that you'll be reading in the book, and to try and give you a little visual to enhance what you've been or about to read in your first chapter. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is download a software called Notepad++, and you can see in my Google search that I have put in Notepad++, and there it is. So Notepad++ is simply an editor that allows us to write our HTML code. We'll go into what all that means in a little bit, but for now what I'd like you to do is download Notepad++, and this is what we're going to be using to create our websites. So pretty straightforward. Click on that and I'll give you a few seconds to get that done. Hopefully you didn't have any trouble downloading Notepad++ and getting that running on your machine. Before we jump into Notepad++ and write our very first website, some things I want to review with you or get into your head so you have an idea what we're all about here. The first thing I want you to know is we are learning a language called HTML. HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and this is the language we use to create basic websites. Hypertext simply means when we are on a website and you see a link, you know that you get the little finger and you know that you've clicked on it and you'll be taken to another website or another location. We call that a hypertext. Means when we click on a word and we are taken someplace else. So the first part of this HTML stands for hypertext, or the ability for us to click to other documents or other websites or other pages. The second part of HTML stands for markup language. And what a markup language is gives us the ability to intermix with human readable words. In other words, here is a human readable word, but there's a special annotation that's used, and in this case the greater than P, I got that backwards, less than P, greater than P. You'll also see the ending tag, which simply means it's the same thing with this forward slash. This notation that you see here is the hypertext, or excuse me, the markup language, and the markup language tells the computer to do something as opposed to the human readable part for the human. So the markup language is on the page for the computer, and then of course the human readable part that the computer is supposed to display. So you'll be very well versed in this type of notation because that's what we use to create websites. In this particular case, just to give you a heads up on what it's going to look like, this particular notation here says I'm about to present you a paragraph. So this human readable text is a paragraph, and then we close that annotation and we call it actually a tag with the closing tag. So in other words, everything between the opening tag and the closing tag is what's supposed to receive that command. So all of this in between the opening and closing tag should be treated as a paragraph. So the computer, in our case the browser, knows everything in between these opening and closing P tags should be printed this way in a paragraph format, which you'll see in a little bit. And here's the human readable part that I'm supposed to display. So directions to the computer and what the computer is supposed to therefore display. Okay, HTML is what we call an interpreted language. And what that means is that if you have any kind of programming experience in the past, you might have known that you had to compile your code, or in other words, as soon as you created the code, you had to make it, turn it all into machine language, or similarly to creating a .exe file, for example. But HTML is completely interpreted, which means that we don't turn it into compiled code. It remains readable to the human at all times until the browser is ready to display it to the web viewer, whoever's looking at the web page, and only at that time will the code be converted into machine language. So it's inefficient in a way, if you will, because every time that web page is rendered, that computer that's rendering that web page has to turn it into computer language code before it actually displays it. But the flip side is it's easy for us to create, and we don't have to have anything special in order to create it. In other words, we're going to use an editor. The editor we're using is Notepad++, and an editor is simply a tool that programmers use to create their code. It can be very fancy, like Visual Studio. If you have any programming experience in the past, you might have done C# in Visual Studio. Or it can be very simple. You can create web pages, for example, in Notepad, because we don't have to compile or turn the code into machine language. We can keep it simply as human readable text file, if you will. We're actually using Notepad++ as our editor. That'll be the tool we'll be using, and Notepad++ is simply a beefed up version of Notepad. So it gives us a little bit more fancy things that we can use that aren't available in Notepad. But in theory, you can simply make a website in Notepad. In fact, in the old days, that's all we ever used. So those are some of the basic terminologies, and this will all be something that will be very intuitive to you very shortly. But I thought I'd get you started on some of the verbiage and language that we use. Okay, enough blah blah blah. Let's create our first web page. Yay! All right, so I have Notepad++ open in front of me, and the first thing I'm going to do is save the file. File, save as. If that went off the screen there. I'm going to call this file index.html. And the reason I'm doing that, and we'll get into this in more detail, but I'd like you to get in the habit of starting all of your beginning files with the file name of index. That is the default page that all URLs, such as otc.edu, google.com, mywebpage.com, it doesn't matter, all of the URLs will look for a default page by the name of index. In our case, .html, and that's the page that will be rendered if no other pages are specified. So please get in the habit of typing in index for your first page name as your home page, so to speak. Okay. It'll default to normal text. We're not doing a .txt file. I typed in .html, or you can come and choose hypertext markup language file. Either will give you this .html extension. So go ahead and save your first file by the name of index.html. And then I'm going to save mine to the desktop. Yes, already exists. Okay, that's fine. All right, so now I'm going to add some hypertext markup language, So markup language, in our case, is going to start with the less than. I'm going to put an exclamation point, capital, doctype, space, HTML, and you'll see this in your book. Okay, so what we're creating here right off the bat is absolutely the bare skeleton of any website that is created. So all websites are going to begin with the skeleton that I'm creating here today. For the moment, we'll explain what doctype HTML means at another time, but basically we're just declaring this is what's called an HTML5. And again, we'll get into that more detail later. But for now, just take at face value that at the very beginning of every web page, I have to have this exclamation point doctype HTML. Perfect. Okay, the next absolute in order, bare minimum we need for a website is the next tag is going to be HTML. Now I use the word tag. Tag is this markup language. Tag refers to, remember before we saw the letter P, this time we're using HTML. Remember these are computer commands, things that are telling the browser what to do. So in this case we need to start off with a tag called HTML. And I'm going to put the greater than sign. Okay? Now, almost all, not all, but almost all, and you saw this in the P tag I had earlier, must, if you open a tag, in other words, I've started a tag here with .html, I must have a matching closing tag, which means that I have to have the same tag with this / to indicate that here's my opening, here's my closing, Mr. Computer, and everything in here needs to be treated with this HTML command, whatever that means, and we'll learn about that more in a minute. Well, sometimes that's a little frustrating having to remember to put the closing tag. And I suggest that you make sure, what I usually do is as soon as I type in opening tag, I immediately write the closing tag, and then you might see me do a couple enters so I know things go in between. That way I know I have both an opening tag and a closing tag, and you can see that Notepad is trying to help me put those two together. Here's your opening ones, here's these all match, and it's trying to give me an indication that I have an opening and a closing. Well, you can, if you want, I'm going to erase my closing tag for a minute. Actually, I'm going to erase all of the HTML for a moment. Here's a little shortcut if you'd like to remember. If you go into Settings and you choose Preferences, and I come down here to Auto Completion, if I choose HTML close tag, it's going to help me. Now, this isn't always the smartest thing. Sometimes it does it incorrectly, but at least it's a good thing to keep in mind, or it helps us out a little bit. The idea here now is, you'll notice if I type in HTML, it's going to help me do a closing tag. And the reason why I say it's not always the smartest is sometimes it makes closing tags, and I said a little earlier, not all tags require a closing tag, but most of them do, so this is a little shortcut to help me remember to put all my closing tags in. So I'm going to leave that one on for the moment. Okay, so as I said, everything that I put in between this opening and closing HTML tag, I've just told the browser treat it like it's HTML. So everything that goes in this opening and closing tag should now be indented. So I'm going to hit my Tab key. And I need two other commands, or two other tags. One is a head tag. Notice it closed it for me. And one is the body tag. Okay? So the head tag and the body tag, because they are part of this HTML, they go within the HTML tag, should be indented. First of all, it makes it easier to read. Now I can very clearly see that I have my opening tag and my closing tag, whereas if I did not have it indented, then it's a little bit harder to see that. Okay. So indenting helps make it more readable. It helps us make it easier to maintain in the future because things are organized and looks a little cleaner. They're human readable, easier to read. Now, the browser doesn't care about white spaces. So if you left it like this, the browser would be perfectly happy. But I can assure you that your teacher, that would be me, is not very happy about that. So the proper convention is to indent what we call nested tags. These tags are nested within the HTML tag, and so we indent them. Hopefully that makes sense. So things are going to go within the head tag, so I'm going to leave some spaces, and things go within the body tag. So I've got really nice indenting now. You can also start to see these little gray lines that are starting to show up? It might be hard to see on my video, but you should be able to see it on your screen. These little lines are trying to line up your indenting. So you can see here's my opening head, and there's the closing head tag that goes with it. So it helps give you a visual line. All right, so since I'm putting things in the head tag, and they're contained within the head tag, that means I should what? Indent. I hope that's what you said. So I have some more tags I'm going to add within the heads. It's kind of like making an outline. You always indent your next set of bullets within bullets type of a thing. Okay. In the head tag is used for anything that our browser needs that's not going to be printed on the website. That's really important to keep in mind. Anything I want printed, like if I want to print Hello World, it's going to go in the body. Anything I want printed or displayed to my viewer needs to go in the body tags. The head tag is simply informational. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So we're going to put in a tag called title. There's my closing tag. It's nicely indented. Okay. And in title, I'm going to put my first page. Okay. So here's the human readable part of my hypertext markup language. And because I have my human readable text surrounded by title tags, that means the browser knows, oh, I'm supposed to treat this as a title. And I'll show you what a title does. So I'm going to save this file, and then I'd really like to see what a title does and see my new web page. So how do I do that? Well, right now the easiest way to do it is to come up to our menu and choose Run. And if you look at run, you can tell which browser I want to run this particular, my brand new web page in. So I'm going to launch it in Firefox. Okay. And wow, that doesn't look like a very interesting page. That's because I haven't told the page to print anything yet. But here's what title does. My first page. So title is what shows up in this tab. So I'm looking good so far. But I don't have anything in this portion, anything that's being displayed to the viewer. And remember, that's what goes in the body tags. So let's put something in our body tag so our web page looks a little bit better. Okay, so head is strictly information that is not printed. I think I'm going to add a comment here. I'm going to get it started and then I'll explain it in a minute. So to make comments, we use this format. We use explanation dash dash, and I'm going to write, let's see, text here, or let's not do text. Let's say whatever is here does not get displayed on web page. I can even make another line. It is for the browser. Additional information. Okay, now I have to close that. Okay, notice I don't have an opening and closing tag, but I have, in an essence, this is closing, so I have a double dash and an explanation and a single dash. So what I've just done is created what are called comments, if you're familiar with programming already. But what I've done is created anybody who reads a human who reads my code, this is information I thought might be helpful to you. The browser doesn't use it. It's not displayed to my web viewer, but it's simply there for people looking at my code. So what I would ask for you when you're turning in assignments is this is a good place to put, let's see, I'll add to it. If I were you, this is a place I would put my name, maybe, name, Kirsten Markley. Maybe I'd put the page, index.html, and I'd probably put the date. Today is June 6th, 2016, and my assignment, Hello World. Okay. Okay. Yay! Now notice that the browser, or Notepad, excuse me, not the browser, Notepad is trying to be smart, and it's trying to give me some color indication as to what I'm attempting to do or what it thinks I'm attempting to do. For example, it knows that I'm trying to make comments, so everything is green. And until I properly put the dash dash greater than sign, you can see that everything is green. So it gives me some kind of visual aid that, oh, I haven't quite done my code correctly yet. Oh, that's right, I need to put the closing information. So you can see that tags are showing up in blue and the human readable text is showing up in black. If I had not saved this file as a .html file, let's just do it for an example, and I actually saved it as a .txt file instead. .txt file. Remember the default that it gave us when we first got started? Now let's look and see what the code would do. And you can see that I don't have all of that pretty color notation. So because of that reason, that's why I told you at the very beginning it's always a good idea to save it immediately as an .html file. And I'm just going to go through that one more time. Hypertext index.html. And so yes, I know I've already done it once. So now I have all that pretty colors to try and give me some kind of clue to make sure that I'm creating this file correctly. All right, so to reiterate, we've got our opening and closing tags and nested tags. We're going to indent within their enclosing tags, similar to an outline or a bulleted list. And the head tag contains information for the browser, but it's not information that will be printed on my web page. So information printed on the web page all goes within the body tags. So again, this is a nested tag, so I'm going to indent with my tab. And we're going to use the tag h1. You can see that I'm getting this little prompt, another benefit to saving it as a .html file. Open it and closed it for me. That looks good. And in here, I'm going to type in hello world. That's appropriate, right? Now, could I put all of this on the same line because I don't want to use up all of that space? Absolutely. Okay. But again, think about readability. Think about indenting so it's easy to make sure and it's easy to read, easy to make sure that I have both an opening and a closing tag. Very important. Will it display without the closing tag? Yes. Is it correct? No. So you need to make sure that you have an opening and closing tag where appropriate. Okay, so now I have Hello World in the body. I'm going to save it. I'm going to click on Run, look at it in Firefox, and let's see what I have. Sure enough, I have Hello World. This is because I have the title tag in my head tags. So I have created my very first web page. Looking good. How's yours looking?